Well, good morning. I'm Chud Wendell. I appreciate those that are on. I expect more to be joining us in a little bit, but this is the September Commercial Property Council, and I think we're in for a pretty good program today, and some information on some of the latest that we've seen out of the legislation this last session. So pretty good conversation, but just a reminder for those that are new to the group, thank you for joining us. But this group really, it started on the basis that we want to be a clean and safe city, and we know we can. And that takes a lot of us working together to do that. So one of the formats that we felt that would make the most sense would be a model that the neighborhood council does. And so Spokane has, I believe it's 30 neighborhood councils. And we formed what's called a pilot council. So it's a pilot commercial property council. And our pure purpose is to assist the city agencies in determining priority needs, just like the neighborhood councils do. Currently, there's over 700 Facebook group members. And if you're not one and you have a Facebook account, just shoot me an email and I can get you connected. It's under Spokane Business and Commercial Property Owners. We're over 360 on the email distribution list, so hopefully you got those. For those on the phone, that's our primary way of communicating. And if you ever have any questions, just reply and we can help you through. And then, really the big thing here that I want to remind is that we try to keep politics out. Is it in today's world that's almost impossible, but we try. And no agendas, no BS. We're purely focused on trying to obtain and be the cleanest and safest city in the US. We meet the second Wednesday of each month, and they've been Zoom, seems to work okay. This time we made an accommodation for today for some schedules. So we happen to be on a Friday, but we'll be back with the second Wednesday in October. And then all communications, if you have anything, please let me know. Sheldon Jackson, Chris Batten, we all are trying to keep things going. I do want to say there's a call to action item there on, and really what we're looking there is that there's been some movement into having the private sector step up and some exciting things. I think we'll be in a position where we'll be able to share more soon. Chris Patterson, if you're on here, he is a big part of it. He has got an amazing network, and I believe that we're going to be seeing some exciting things as it comes forward. So with that, I want to make sure that we will be an hour long. We'll shut her down at 10, get you back to your days. So I don't want to take away from our presenters today. And so the first presentation is going to be by Senator Andy Billig. And just a little bit about Andy. Andy is a proud father, business person, and member of the Spokane community. He previously served a term in the State House of Representatives, and he was elected to the state Senate by the constituents in the 3rd Legislative District in 2012 and was reelected in 2016. And then he was elected Majority Leader by Senate Democrats in 2018. In the Senate, Andy continues to be an advocate for children, working families, and small businesses, putting people first in Spokane and throughout the state. He has been particularly active as a legislative leader on early learning and K-12 education. He has also led efforts to pass legislation to increase transparency and equity in our democracy. And what we're specifically going to be hearing from Senator Billig on today is the 2021 Washington police reform legislation, as well as drug possession. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Senator Billig.
All right. Thank you, Chud. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I always want to hear feedback and always glad to share my perspective. So thanks for your continued dialogue and for the opportunity. And I know so many people on this call, so nice to see everyone. Chris Batten, I see you there, and I know it's your birthday, so happy birthday, Chris. We don't have to sing happy birthday, but Chud, that's up to you. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about the police reform bills and the Blake decision. I've got probably 10 or 15 minutes, and I want to leave 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. And I'm not specifically speaking about homelessness today, but glad to discuss that during the Q&A, because I know that's an important element to what this group has been working on, is concerned about. And I think it's actually an area where we really could make some progress and where I'd be excited to work with you. I was really encouraged by that presentation on one of your previous meetings from Houston. I think Darren help to arrange that. And I think that's what we need. We need a vision. And, housing and homelessness is such a core root element to so many of the symptoms that we're seeing that are concerning. And I think we need that vision. I think we can help the city with that vision. And certainly the state has the ability and has provided some revenue streams to help with that. And it's only going to get worse if we don't address it, because we know there's just a new study came out about families that feel like they're on the verge of foreclosure or eviction, especially with the eviction moratorium ending. So glad to partner with you on that, but that's not my topic for today. So police legislation. So the police bills, and there were a number of them that passed this year, were the result of over a year of work, and with extensive input from community members, including law enforcement. And that's not to say that everybody agrees. It's not possible for everybody to agree, because you have people coming from all sides. So somebody's not going to agree on this point or on that point, but trying to hear all the perspectives is a priority for the legislature. And that's bipartisan. And that's through the formal structures that we have, through testifying at a committee, but also the informal structures where we have dialogue, and, Chud calling me or emailing me, or, work with, Chief Meidel, or with Sheriff Knezevich, or with the frontline officers. All of that stuff happens on a sort of more informal, one legislator to a group of constituents or a person in their community, as well as that formal structure. So that went on for a year. And in the end, the suite of bills that were passed were supported by certainly a majority of the legislature, supported by some law enforcement, but there's also concern, as I think you've heard, and in some cases, probably a need for clarification, and we're working on that. But the overall goal of these bills was to add transparency, to add accountability, and to continue to build trust between the public and police. And also a focus was to reduce the use of force and to keep both the public and law enforcement officers as safe as possible. And I am really deeply appreciative to the work that law enforcement does. I think they have a very difficult job. I think and they're vital to our community. So I'm sensitive to their concerns and working really hard to try to help with either clarifications or at least working together, just as we did while we were working to create the bills. And it's a lot of change. It's a lot of change all at once. One thing I just wanted to say, these bills that passed are not about defunding the police, because that has been conflated. The police reform and defunding the police has been conflated. I don't support defunding the police, even though I supported these bills. And, our community has overwhelmingly said, we want transparency and accountability. Our community said we support the police, but we also want accountability. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. Our city voted over 70% for a charter amendment about police accountability. It's important to the people of Spokane. And I also believe that most of the people in our community don't want to defund the police. If anything, some of these measures that passed are going to require more police resources. And I think we have to recognize that and be ready to support that as well if we're going to support these reform bills. Now, I mentioned that some changes may be needed, and I think they will. I think there are adjustments, as there always is when big legislation passes, and been really talking a lot to the leaders, law enforcement leaders locally in Olympia, and also the rank and file officers, as well as community members. And I think we will see some adjustments, and I'll note those as I go through a few specifics. So I thought what might be helpful is I was going to run through 5 of the changes. There's more than this, and you might have questions about other elements, but 5 of the changes that I think I've heard about the most and that has gotten the most media attention on the police bills. The first is this focus on de-escalation. And there was one bill specifically about use of force, and that was really the goal of that bill is to slow down the process, to focus on de-escalation before using force, and then to have the least level of force used if force is needed. And, you know, our Spokane Police Department, Sheriff's Department actually have been leaders in de-escalation. This is nationally where things are moving, to focus on de-escalation, because it keeps the officers safer and it keeps the public safer. Now, one thing about de-escalation is it does take longer. And that's when some of the feedback that we've gotten is, and that's one of the reasons I think we might even need some more police resources, because it does take longer, but it is safer and for everyone involved, even if it is less efficient. Just one note on sort of helping to, and there was an article about needing more police officers. We have open slots in Spokane, and I'm committed to helping to get those spots. One thing that we've heard is that we may need an extra academy class, a police academy class at the State Criminal Justice Training Center funded. And that's something that we are actively talking about. And I think you'll see a proposal for that in the upcoming session. One question that's related to de-escalation that's come up is, do police have to leave the scene of a crime, if no crime is committed? So that's related to this idea of de-escalation. I think this one's been largely resolved, but since it got a lot of attention, I thought I'd address it. So in the use of force bill, there's a list of techniques for de-escalation that police are asked to consider, to think about. Leaving the scene if there's no crime is one of those techniques that they should consider using. So if an officer believes that the scene will de-escalate if they leave, then they should probably leave. The fact is, often the police being there is actually a de-escalating factor. And in that case, they shouldn't leave. So we're asking them to consider that as a de-escalation tactic, not that they have to do that. And I've talked with the city attorney that advises the Spokane Police Department, and she agrees with this. I think this one's largely been dealt with, but it is one that we might want to clarify in a follow-up bill if police agencies still have question on this. The second one I'll mention that has gotten some media attention is about welfare checks. So especially early on, there were some police departments said they're no longer going to go on certain calls. They're not going on welfare checks. And this, we heard about this a little bit. I think now most departments have backed off this stance. And I want to credit the Sheriff's Department and Ozzie, because they were never said this. They said, we're going on all the calls. But there's nothing in any of the bills that says that police should not go on certain calls. And this is one area where the Attorney General has actually already weighed in and said, yeah, there's nothing in the bills that say that. Now, it does sound like with the Spokane Police Department, they've made some changes in how they co-respond with the fire department to be more in line with how other cities do that. But that is not related to anything in these bills. The third area I wanted to mention: can police detain and transport people who are having a mental health crisis? So the intention from the legislature is absolutely that should continue, and it's supported in several parts of the RCWs. And there's two ways in which this will happen. One is that there's a designated crisis responder. In our community, it's somebody from Frontier Behavioral Health, and this is in law, and this has been in law for a while, that they can issue an order for detention, transport and detention, and the police then carry out that order. Nothing changed in that law. That's still there if the designated crisis responder gives that order. But the other thing is the police, even without that order, if there's an imminent threat to themselves or other, they can use force and detain somebody and transport them. There's definitely, police and the attorneys that advise them have said, yes, we see it in both places. Please issue a clarification, and we will do that either through an AG opinion or through follow-up legislation. The fourth area that I wanted to mention that's gotten a little bit of attention is about special commissions. And it's interesting, statewide, this has not really been an issue, but I've talked both with Chief Meidel and with Sheriff Knezevich about special commissions. So special commissions are where a police department or sheriff's department gives limited police powers to somebody who's not a certified police officer. So for instance, there are people who help to transport defendants and prisoners from the jail to a courtroom, let's say, and they need police powers because they have to detain people as they do that. And the same way, like the STA security has limited commissions. So this is one where we locally, especially, really worked together, worked with the sheriff's department, particularly worked with the county prosecutor, then reached out to the attorney general's office and the CJTC, the Criminal Justice Training Center, and was able to clarify and answer the questions. And now, at least at the sheriff's department, I think that's largely been resolved, but it is an example of us working together locally to solve that. The fifth one I want to mention, I guess I'm going to do 6 because I'm on 5 and I got 6. Okay, this one will be quick. There's a restriction on shotguns and beanbag guns, completely unintended. There was a limit on 50 caliber rounds, okay, which nobody really objected to. That's a military level of ammunition that police, I think most people agree police shouldn't use. But inadvertently, that can technically include shotguns and beanbag guns. And people don't think about shotgun rounds and beanbags in terms of caliber. So nobody, the law enforcement lobbyists, the legislators, nobody caught this. Clearly that was not the intention, especially on the beanbags, because there's a bunch of other places where it's referenced in law that those should be used. So that is one of the areas that will definitely get a fix. And then the last area that I want to mention, which is probably the one that's gotten the most attention, is about the standard of proof required for law enforcement to use force or to detain somebody. And it's previously the standard that was used was reasonable suspicion, and now it's probable cause. So police come upon a situation. In the past, they could just say, we're just going to control the situation here. We're just going to handcuff people, hold them down, whatever, detain them until we figure out what's going on. And they could do that on reasonable suspicion. Now the standard is probable cause. And there are ways to deal with this. I've talked extensively with the chief and the sheriff about this. Police can order everybody to stay, and then it can be obstruction if the people leave. Now, that's limited. You can't always use that, but that's one of the solutions that the head of the Criminal Justice Training Center has suggested. Another way that it's dealt with is that one officer talks to a victim to establish the probable cause, and in many cases, this can be done in a minute or two, while another officer, follows that person walking away from the scene until the probable cause is established. And again, this could take more officers. It might mean that we want to send 2 officers to a scene that previously 1 officer would have gone to, and it's a reason that we might need more resources. But the difference of the opinion, I think, really comes down to this. Is probable cause a reasonable standard to use to detain somebody? If the police were going to come and use force to handcuff you or wrestle you to the ground to keep you somewhere, and what's that standard that they should use? And I think probable cause is reasonable. It's the same standard that's used for the government, police, to be able to enter your house. And yeah, it would be easier for law enforcement to enter your house based on reasonable suspicion, but it would mean that the rights of some innocent people would be infringed upon. And so we as a society have said probable cause is that right standard. And we're extending that same standard to the use of force, that there needs to be probable cause. And it's a balance between efficiency and really personal liberty and our freedom and the government's police power to use physical force against you or your children. And that's the balance. And I get there's disagreement. And I think that there are several very nuanced, legally detailed questions about the use of force and this new standard that also are going to get clarified. Okay, I want to touch on Blake decision before I run out of time, and so we have time for questions. The Blake Supreme Court decision, Washington State Supreme Court in February came out with a decision that was really, I think, a surprise to just about everyone in the scope of the ruling. They ruled that basically the law related to drug possession was unconstitutional, was illegal. So upon that ruling coming down in February, all drug possession was then legal in Washington state, and created a really difficult situation for the legislature. Because normally if we make big policy like this, we take a year or more to get input, to figure out the details, to build a legislative consensus. And that's what we did with those law enforcement bills. We didn't have that luxury. We were just handed this in the middle of a session. And what usually happens if we don't have the time to build that majority and that consensus, then the default is that a bill doesn't pass. And usually that's fine. I mean, the system in the legislature and similar in Congress, the default is for things not to pass. That's on purpose, because the founders of our state and our country, they didn't want bills to pass if they weren't ready. So they made it really hard to pass a bill. So that's usually a good thing, to have the default be that nothing passes on difficult things. The problem is, in this case, if we went to the default and no bill passed, then all drug possession would be legal, ongoing. So there was a strong bipartisan majority, one, that we should take action and try to find an agreement, and two, that we should, bipartisan agreement that we should take, not unanimous, but bipartisan, that we should take a public health approach to addiction. Drug possession typically is connected to addiction. Addiction is a health problem, and it's clear that treating it like a health problem is the most effective way to deal with it. It's also clear that our previous drug possession laws weren't working. I heard from many of you before the Blake decision about your frustration with drug use, public drug use, and the ramifications of that drug use. So we know that what we were doing before, the penalty approach, the felony approach, was not working. So we know that, and we know that a public health approach could have a better chance of working. So we had this bipartisan majority to focus on a public health approach. And we passed it. We passed it with bipartisan support. So, and do we know if it's certainly going to work? I think it's too early to tell. It's been in place for a month. We also have, one of the things that happened with this bill was a lot of funding support for diversion services and for treatment. Because this bill got passed, because of it kind of came down to us in the middle of session, that money is still in the works, and the contracts are being signed, and the money is going to start flowing. So I think we have to give a chance for this to work. But because we knew this was something that was, and give it a chance because it's the most likely chance to succeed. And we know, again, what we were doing before didn't work. But because we knew that this might not be that we might want more time to try to figure this out and see how this new approach is working, we did a 2-year sunset. So after 2 years, the legislature is going to have to come back and come up with a permanent solution. We could continue what we're doing now. We could go back to some version of a prior system, or we could come up with some new way or tweak one of the versions that we had. And I was really proud of the bipartisan work that we had on this. I mean, the version that came out of the Senate, which is very similar to the bill that passed in the end, was 14 Democrats and 14 Republicans. We often have bipartisan bills. 90% of what we do is bipartisan, but 14 Democrats and 14 Republicans on a big consequential bill is hard. And that was a lot of, I really appreciate my Republican counterpart, the Republican leader, John Braun. He and I worked closely on that. The bill came back from the House a little bit different, but one thing that was really good about what came back from the House, it had that guaranteed funding. It had $160 million in funding. So I think all of us need to keep in touch and get input, and we're going to work towards a solution. There is a commission that's been created to work on that more permanent solution. Yeah, I think I want to stop there because it looks like that'll still give me about 10 minutes for questions and comments, and eager to hear your questions, expand on anything I've mentioned or any other legislative matters, or for those of you that know my other job, questions on baseball are welcome as well. Okay.
I'll start with a nice season for the Indians. They're on a roll and doing well. Got to go to a couple games. I'm going to start with a couple of questions in regards to the law enforcement reform. Betsy Coles asked one about limited commission officers. So she's asking, are you saying those can still exist? In her case, I know River Park Square, they have depended on those powers for a number of years to effectively stop shoplifting, active violent behavior when the police can't get there. Betsy, can you share the statistic you shared with us on whatever day we met regarding the number of monthly stops and how many of those are violent?
Yeah, thanks. So Andy, our River Park Square security, we have a small number of folks who have been limited commission officers for a number of years. And so monthly, we have 150 incidents and 20 of those are violent a month. And without limited commission, I mean, we were able to retain people because the police there are times when the police can't get to us for over an hour, and you have somebody threatening with a knife in the center or, what have you. Our hands are tied now. We can't do anything. We have incidences in the last several weeks where shoplifting has escalated, and we're not talking a bracelet off a stand. We're talking grabbing armloads of goods and casually walking out because folks know we can't stop them and retain them in the back, waiting for the police to come arrest.
Yeah. So
the limited commission officer powers have been huge for us for, I don't know if it's been like 10 years, but so I'm glad to hear that there's a solution, but we've been told by the city police, no, we're done. That can't exist. So I
think every case is specific. The sheriff's department had reached out specifically, so I worked with them on their specific issue, and we got it resolved. And they are doing limited commission. So I think if you want to, maybe we don't have to take everybody's time, but maybe you, me, Chief Meidel, and we can figure out what the specific concern is, and then, I mean, we were able to solve it in the one that we worked on, so I'd be fairly optimistic.
Okay, great, because I know the park and STA are also concerned. So
Gonzaga also I've talked to, but okay. Yeah,
we'll follow up. Thanks.
And this is a follow-up comment. I know I've been working with Susan Meyer on a bus stop on one of our Hutton properties that has had tremendous activity and issues with drug use and some more violence. And so she had told me as well, and I think Katie Bree is even addressing it, that they were recently, Susan believed that they had 16 limited commission officers patrolling in shifts of 4 that provided tremendous value in addressing issues surrounding that building. Now that they have to call the police, but they are, of course, busy doing other things. I know they still have security, but they don't have that limited commission. So if you can include them in the conversation as well. So moving along, a question, and a lot of us on this call are property owners or property managers or business owners. And what I've seen the last week of August, we had 7 trespass from Hutton property on the corner of Division and Wellesley. I would say of those, we called crime check 3 times because they were appearing to be not just loitering and trespassing. There was other activities going on, drug distribution, drug shooting up. We can't get anywhere with crime check now. There's just no response. So that threshold change from where we would have had a response to now, it's almost like we don't even resonate unless there's a crime that was actually committed. And I believe this has to do with the amount of time each service call, each police call is taking because of the legislation, as well as the change from that reasonable suspicion to probable cause to reasonable suspicion. My challenge with this is it's putting the pressure on us as property owners, our tenants, trying to enforce it. And then we're hiring more private security. So I've doubled the security for our Hutton properties in the last 90 days just to deal with it. So I guess what's your take on that? What would you say? How far do we go until we know that this legislation is having an impact on public safety or not? Is there a measurement that you're looking at, or the Senate's looking at, legislators are looking at, that can say, yeah, we need to change it, or do we write it out?
Well, I think that we're still in the adjustment time, and talking to law enforcement. Look, it's a lot of change, and it's happening at once. So I mean, I'm being, I give a lot of leeway as the law enforcement work through these changes. I think staffing is an issue, and I think helping to to fill. I mean, even before allocating any more money, is just filling the positions that are already there. I know from my own experiences that even before this bill, it was sometimes difficult to get a response because police were doing higher priority things. That's not entirely a change because of these bills. That has been something that, police, they do the right thing. They have this prioritization process, and they already have. Trespassing is still illegal, and I know they still will respond when they have the resources available. But I think it is a resource issue, and I'm glad and continue to work with both at the statewide level and locally to help provide that.
Thanks. I'm going to go. I have Natalie. You have a question. If you want to unmute yourself, and then I'm going to a couple drug decriminalization questions, and then we'll move on. Natalie?
Yes. Hi. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. There are things that work because they've worked since the Roman era. There are things in ancient history. There are solutions to all these problems, and they're actually quite simple. So we can talk about yoga. We can talk about mindfulness. We can talk about Harvard and Stanford and all their studies and studies around the world. There are things that work. We can talk about director of Orofino hospitals, mental hospitals in Idaho, Todd Hurt. I asked him point blank, he implemented a mindfulness and yoga program into all of his hospitals. Mental hospitals, can you definitively say, no question, that 100% of the time, your mindfulness and your yoga programs work at least a little bit, even with those who are heroin addicted and prefrontal cortex is all pitted and brain damage from too much drug use? And he said, yes, there are things that work. This is an experiment. This might be new legislation, but the issues are not new. These issues are age old, and there are answers to this. So I'm going to ask our liberal senator, our open-minded senator, our people first senator, where is the outside of the box thinking? Where is it? Because this isn't working.
Well, I'm not sure, when you say this isn't working, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, I think you're muted there.
Can you unmute, Natalie?
I'll just say, look, I like outside the box thinking.
The new legislation.
Well, the new legislation just went into effect, so I think it's too early to say that it's not working.
My point is that there are things that have worked throughout human history, and stepping back and stepping away and letting people live on the street, drug addicted and defecating, has never, ever, ever for thousands of years been the answer ever.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think we should have people living on the street. And I think we should have a comprehensive plan to address housing and homelessness, like with that Houston presentation. I completely support that and would work with you on that. I completely agree.
Okay, great. Well, we're all being mandated to take a vaccine and wear masks. Why don't we mandate some real health and real wellness, like yoga and mindfulness?
Are you serious? Chud, are you controlling this?
Okay, we're going to keep things going. Natalie, I'm going to have you. I think we got the point there. Apologize, phone's ringing in the background. So I'm going to keep moving because I want to move it on to Sheriff Ozzie before we get into those type of arguments, because that's not. Natalie, I'm going to ask you to unmute or to mute. Thank you. The one question, Senator, I want to ask you, and this is one that I saw coming because of the work I do with the children that we work with, is the impact of drugs. We were on a lockdown for up until March 1st, and literally, when March 1st hit, the kids went back to school and drugs were present again, and even more so than before. So this is a pretty personal issue with the Senate Bill 5476 as it relates to what I call decriminalizing, I think you call recriminalizing. What are your metrics? What are you looking at in the 2-year window? Because I will share with you that we're 33% ahead of Narcan administration through the end of August, and it's over double from 2019. These are Spokane service calls, Spokane Police Department that are issuing them. They saved 3 lives in a less than a 48-hour window last week. I work downtown, and I'm seeing more aggressive and erratic behavior. So my question to you is, what are you measuring? How are we going to measure success? What are the metrics in regards to saying, yep, that legislation worked, or no, it didn't?
Yeah. So yeah, I would just want to address the decriminalization versus recriminalization. You're right. We the Supreme Court decriminalized, and then the legislature with the bill that we passed recriminalized. We put the word knowingly back into the statute. We recriminalized it, but we said we're going to work on the diversion and try to get people the help they need to actually solve the problem. Because it's worse for us as a community and worse for those individuals if we go with a jail approach versus we go with a treatment approach. So I think that we will have to look at all the measures. What has happened with public safety related to people that are drug addicted? How many people have we been able to treat and to get better? I think we're going to look at everything broadly to say, is this working? Both for those individuals and those families of the people that are addicted. I know many of us have had that connection to somebody who we care about to be addicted. And it's terrible for that person, and it's terrible for that family. We can do better for the families and for the individuals and for the community. So I think we're going to look at everything. I think we should look at it broadly. I don't think we should just look at one measure. I think we got to look at it broadly. But we also have to give it a chance to work.
Well, and I appreciate that. I think going into a game or, when we're caring for kids, we have measurements and metrics we know when we're successful or when we're falling short before we go into it. So going in the battle and then setting up our plans and what our objectives are when they're in the middle of battle, it's difficult. So I feel like we don't have the metrics yet. I don't know. I'm just not reassured that we know where we're going with this. And so a 2-year experiment's enough. There's an individual on this call who just lost her sister back in June for an overdose. And I know she's going to be pretty passionate on it. She made a statement, 30 days of treatment is not enough. So I want to end it there. I know this is a passionate one, and I appreciate you taking the courage and the time to be on here, Andy, because it says a lot about you and your character. I don't agree with that. As you know, the Senate Bill 5476, I'm very frustrated with it. And I do think we need to keep this dialogue going somehow so you can hear from us on the front line as what our impacts and implications are that we're dealing with, because I feel like we weren't listened to. I really do. But let's keep the conversation going, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And one thing I'll say is on that, and I do appreciate that, Chad, and I do appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I want the dialogue. I want to hear from people that agree with me, and I want to hear from people who don't agree with me, because I represent everybody, and nobody has all the good ideas cornered. On this one thing, I just want to say, because there's a mention about this has been tried other places. It really hasn't, and we wouldn't have tried it ourselves if we hadn't been handed this unexpected decriminalization by the Supreme Court. So this is a chance to rethink it, to be outside the box, and to do it in a way that has the chance to just completely change the dynamic on how we do treatment. Because yes, it is the problem of our time, and we didn't want to keep doing it the way we knew didn't work. So anyway, thank you so much. I want to leave.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. And you're welcome to stay on if you like.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to move right into Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich, and I think most everybody knows, but just a quick introduction. Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich was appointed as sheriff of Spokane County on April 11th, 2006. He was elected to the office of sheriff in the fall of 2006 and is currently serving his 3rd term as our sheriff. This year marks his 29th year in the law enforcement profession. As sheriff of Spokane County, he oversees the law enforcement activities in the unincorporated areas of Spokane County and several contract cities and towns. He is also responsible for managing the county's Department of Emergency Management. So with that, Sheriff, if you would unmute, and it's all yours.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering, is there a way I can put a quick PowerPoint up? It will help.
Yes, we gave you share screen, and so I'm not sharing now, so you should be able to do it.
All right. Do you have the PowerPoint showing?
We do, yes.
Okay. The question as to why these reforms happen, I think is a very important one. From the law enforcement perspective, after listening over 2020, listening to people who were protesting, people who rioted across the nation, not just in Spokane, the voice from the activists and some politicians was, we need to do something because when the police show up, we only rush in, escalate, beat, and shoot people. That was a narrative. And I can tell you that that narrative has been false. It was false when it was stated, and it will always be false. People think that de-escalation is something that is new. I got into law enforcement. I went to the academy a month after Rodney King. I have seen this for 32 years. And de-escalation has been part of our training for 32 years. And that is the fact. Andy mentioned that SPD and the Sheriff's Office are national leaders in de-escalation. In 2005, the city of Spokane led the nation in their CIT training, their critical incident training for mental health issues. They were the front runners of that. In 2007, the Sheriff's Office and the city police worked together and created the nation's first excited delirium training. So a lot of emotion went into the why here without really looking at the facts. You know, people talk about following the science. What is the science behind officer-involved shootings, behind use of force, excessive use of force in the United States? When are we going to talk about that? When does that get mentioned? Because if you mention that, if you really study that, which I have, you find that excessive use of force happens in the United States at a statistically insignificant level. I mean, it is so rare that you can't really put a statistical value to it. So when we take a look at what was passed recently by the legislature, and for some reason I'm having trouble getting my slide to move. Let me see if I can get it back here. There we go. So the impacts of 1054. One of the things that they did was because activists had convinced our elected leaders that we were becoming militarized, and I've heard this debate since 2014. And it was actually started in 2015 when the ACLU wrote War Coming Home, which mentioned the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, by the way. Interesting read, which was totally false. The 1054 said that we shouldn't have these type of weapons. Tanks, armed helicopters. I don't know of any law enforcement agency in the United States that had an armed helicopter or an F-16, armed drones, or any of this. This is what you call overkill. And Andy mentioned the 50 caliber debate concerning our shotguns. The reason that is here is because people were convinced that we were using 50 caliber machine guns. And there's no agency I know of that had 50 caliber machine guns. However, the 50 caliber round is useful to law enforcement, as the Dallas Police Department found out when they had to stop a subject that was shooting up Dallas. And the only way they could stop him, because he was in an armored vehicle, was to use a 50 caliber sniper rifle to stop and disable that armored vehicle. So there are uses, but nobody asked those questions. Nobody asked for those type of examples as to why that particular round may be useful. Now, does the sheriff's office have that round? No, we don't. But is there a potential use for it? Yes, there is. And SPD had that caliber. They don't have that anymore. They don't have that capability to stop somebody in an armored vehicle that is terrorizing our community. And that has happened in the past throughout the United States, that people have had armored vehicles. The other aspect is they limited the use of tear gas to riots, barricaded subjects, and hostages situations. The highest elected official in the county, as depending on the type of government we have, was given the authority to authorize that. The problem is that is in direct conflict with the law, because people forget that the sheriff is the chief executive officer of the county. They forget that aspect. They forget that the sheriff is the one that is by law mandated to put down riots. So the sheriffs of the state of Washington are now bringing legal action to get this clarified, because it's in direct conflict with state law and the Constitution of the state of Washington. The other thing that 1054 was, it prohibits chokeholds and neck restraints. The reason that this is here is because George Floyd, people saw an officer with his knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd. And I will tell you what happened to Mr. Floyd. Every officer in the United States looked at that and went, that's unacceptable, inexcusable. But that was not a chokehold. In no way, shape, or form was it a chokehold. And I can tell you that on multiple occasions, we have used a neck restraint, because we don't use chokeholds. That's not an authorized hold. But we have used neck restraints, and it has saved our officers' lives, and it has saved the individual we were dealing with lives. According to the National Criminal Justice Training Commission, there has been no documented death due to chokeholds in the United States. People will go, wait a minute, Sheriff, what about Eric Gardner in New York? Now, Eric Gardner did not have a chokehold used on him, and Eric Gardner died from a heart attack. That is a fact. I've watched the video. I've watched the video in slow motion multiple times. I've read every one of these cases. The next one it prohibits is no-knock warrants. Why is this one here? Because of Breonna Taylor. The problem is people don't realize what the true facts behind Miss Taylor's case was. Yes, they did have a no-knock warrant, but they knocked and they announced. People seem to forget that the first person that was shot during that contact was a police officer. They returned fire. Sadly, Miss Taylor was killed, shot and killed. But they knocked and announced. In the state of Washington, getting a no-knock warrant prior to this law was rare, extremely rare. Matter of fact, in the 25 years I've been with the sheriff's office, I can recall one use of a new no-knock warrant, one. And the reason we used that new no-knock warrant was we had a report of a human trafficking situation, sex trafficking situation, where the victims were reportedly being held in the basement of the house in a cage. We wanted that no-knock warrant because we didn't want the bad guys to have a chance once we're knocking on that door to go down and harm the victims. That's why you use no-knock warrants. When we know that there is an extreme likelihood that we are going to face violence from the suspects, we use those no-knock warrants to save our lives, the community's lives, and hopefully the suspects' lives. I've been in SWAT for 9 years, held every position on that team. And I can tell you the definition of a successful SWAT operation: no one gets hurt. That is our definition of a successful operation. No one gets hurt. Not the suspect, not the community, and not us. And that's why I keep telling people, de-escalation, we've had it all the time. When we take a look at the next thing that 1054 did was limited vehicle pursuits. And this one has caused a lot of problems in the state since its enactment. And the reason being, it says you have to have probable cause before you can do a vehicle pursuit, and you have to have 2 crimes specifically mentioned. You can only pursue if it is a violent offense or a sex offense, or somebody's has escaped. The part of that is probable cause is very, very specific. It is not probable cause on a vehicle. It is probable cause on the person inside the vehicle. We had a situation where an individual broke into a fire station, stole a vehicle, damaged hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fire equipment, and had that individual not run into the deputy's patrol car while the deputy was in his patrol car, we would not have been able to pursue that individual. Here's another interesting fact. If a deputy walks up during a traffic stop and that individual in the vehicle punches the deputy and takes off, that's not considered a violent offense. Threats to kill aren't considered a violent offense. There's a lot of work that needs to go on with this one, because you're watching a lot of violent individuals not being pursued and not being stopped and not being apprehended in our state now because of this particular law. This one is one that I really think that we need to rethink, and I understand the intent is to limit pursuits. I'm all for limiting pursuits. They are dangerous, but there are times we have to be able to pursue people, and we have to be able to get people stopped. In our community, we have 6 dead kids in the last year due to gang violence. We have had so many drive-by shootings, and the scary part for us is we're not even getting all the reports on all of the drive-by shootings. We know that. We know that they're not all being reported. And if I have a suspect vehicle and all we have is a description coming out of a neighborhood under this particular law right now, because it used to be reasonable suspicion, it's no longer reasonable suspicion, we cannot pursue that vehicle. And that could hurt our chance to apprehend those people who commit these type of acts. And throughout the nation, I just read about another one yesterday. Another 3-year-old kid got killed during a drive-by shooting. This violence has gone crazy across the United States. And we need to do something to stop it. This bill didn't help us in that area. 1013, it requires a lot of different things in reference to use of force. And I'll let you just read that. because Senator Billick mentioned it, and this involves somebody that's suffering a mental health issue. What are we allowed to do? It comes down to definitions. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand that this isn't law enforcement pushing back. This is our legal advisors going, you can't do this anymore. You're not allowed to do this anymore. And there are certain things that I've looked at on, I think that's really restrictive on the part of legal. But at the same time, legal's job is to protect the county from being sued, protect our officers from being sued, and protect the public. So there are definitions that need to be worked out. And if you look at second bullet point, it's highlighted definition. That's one section that the definition needs to be cleared up. And if you take a look at the last line of that sentence, it says we should leave the area. There's a lot of interpretations to that. And as I told Senator Billig, and I told my entire agency when we had everybody come in for a briefing on this all together, we will always respond. We will respond to everything. This did not change our mandate to go and solve problems for the community. Once we get there, if you find that you're in a situation that you're not sure, then back out. But we will go and make sure people are safe, number one. And number two, we will take care of the issue as much as we can based on the criteria we've been given. But I can tell you there's a lot of fear in your law enforcement officers because they see, and maybe it's not the intent of the legislature, but the way they look at this is, if I make a mistake, I get decertified or I go to jail. And I can't make that type of mistake. And that's a lot of the things that you're hearing out on the street. I have had 5 people will retire from the sheriff's office that I didn't see coming because of this legislation. I'm already down 30. And you talk about we need to find ways to get more law enforcement. How do you convince people to come to work in a state that has done this? This has all but killed my ability to recruit experienced law enforcement officers from outside the state of Washington.
Muzzy, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
This sounds like one of the largest change in policing legislation in your career. Is that a fair statement?
It's the largest change in policing in any state union in my career.
In the drafting of this legislation, how often did Senator Billig or Representative Riccelli reach out to you and get your input and explain what they're doing and ask what the impacts would be?
Don, let me get through this, and then I'll answer that question if you don't mind, because it will come up in the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
All right. The other aspect for use of force is it says we have to have, probable cause. And I show this slide so it gives you the idea of why the legislature did this. It shows the intent of the legislature. It was to address excessive force and discriminatory policing by establishing these requirements. I thought it was important that you see that, because if you haven't read the bill, you need to understand what the thoughts were. And again, probable cause. I can tell you that for the most part, the way I told my staff about this was, do we put our hands on people that don't need our hands put on them? No, the answer is no, we don't. But I can tell you that there are times that we have to do something, some kind of force, and probable cause, we don't have it when we have to use that force. We have reasonable suspicion. If somebody's walking up on me, hands in pockets, and they won't stop, I don't have probable cause of anything at that point. People talk about obstruction when we're working on, reasonable suspicion standard. That has been established in the Supreme Court for the last 50 years. Reasonable suspicion, the court has given us the ability to use force on people that we believe are about to or are committing a crime and they try to get away from us. Well-established case law, well-established law based on the Supreme Court, and that reasonable suspicion, I have reasonable suspicion if somebody's walking up on me with their hands in their pocket and they're not complying with my request to stop, that bad things are going to happen. And I can show you a video of 2 police officers being shot under those circumstances. And the question I asked experienced police officers, at what time did you have probable cause? The only time they had probable cause is when that gun was being fired at them. So there are things we need to think about when we look at these bills and we look at reworking these bills, because probable cause is not the proper standard. Reasonable suspicion is the proper standard established by the courts for the last 50 years. And quite frankly, if challenged, I believe the Supreme Court of the United States will go, no, it's reasonable suspicion is what the law is. The other language to the excessive or the use of force is we will exhaust every available opportunity. Let's address this notion that we need more police because of this. Here's the harsh reality for the state of Washington. You rank 51st in the United States as far as your law enforcement manpower. That means every state plus the Washington, D.C. Metro Police Department has more manpower in it than the state of Washington. We are dead last when it comes to law enforcement in the United States. There is not enough money in the state of Washington to get us up to even mid-range. That is how far we are down. To give you an example, officer per thousand for a rural sheriff's office, and I can assure you that we are not a rural sheriff's office, is 2.5 officers per thousand. I want to say that one more time, 2.5. My officer per thousand is 0.6. When I'm in Elk and I have a problem, it is at least 30 minutes, if I'm lucky, before backup gets to me. You tell me how I'm going to comply with this law when it says, well, you got to call backup and you got to wait for all. How do you do that when things are in chaos at that point? There's not enough manpower as it is right now for us. And again, I am 30 down, and that's 30 on top of being 30 down from my budget being cut in 2008 in the Great Recession. Those positions never came back. So 0.6 per thousand is what I work with. And my peers across the United States go, how in the heck do you do anything? So we have an issue when we talk about, well, we just need to get more police officers. One, you better get your wallet out, because that is a deep dive just to get us anywhere near where we should be staffed. Because again, you are 51st in the nation. De-escalation is the topic of the day. As I told you, we have been training de-escalation for decades. And I want you to look at subsection 3 here. This is put in there because we're prohibited from using the neck restraint. However, we've been told, well, you can use the neck restraint if your life is about to be taken, or there's imminent threat that somebody else's life might be taken. This will insulate you from going to jail, but won't insulate you from being sued. Do you understand now why your police officers are in a slight panic about how do we navigate ourselves through this? There's been a lot of interesting discussions concerning this, and I'll end my presentation here if I can bring the screen back up. For some reason, I can't find. Let's see. Have we stopped sharing the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, you should still be able to because we're not sharing from our side. But if not, I know we're at 10 o'clock, past 10 o'clock, and I wanted to respect your time. Some have dropped off. Sheriff, do you have we appreciate your comments, your presentation. This is obviously, there's so much more than, any of us know and understand. But what I'm hearing is when we look at the data and the facts and the science, I got some issues on how we got here with this legislation, but
I do too. And let me address two little things for you because they've been mentioned. Special commissions. My legal is extremely nervous that we're doing this, but we are doing special commissions. But I can tell you, county legal is extremely nervous about this. They don't agree with CJTC, and I will tell you definitively that CJTC, that organization, is in crisis and a train wreck right now. Because the way that they stated, and we got around our ability to give special commissions, was, well, reserve officers don't need to be trained. They don't need to be certified. Well, that's totally foreign to me because we've always had to train reserve officers and we always had to get them certified, but CJTC is saying that is not required. And to our representatives that are still listening, my goodness gracious, folks, you don't want me putting a reserve officer that hasn't been trained or certified out on the street. That is bad news. And CJTC's ruling in this, under those guidelines, put everybody in extreme liability. But we are doing special commissions, and we're working with STA right now on that. I need to check and see where that process is. So, Ms. Coles, if need be, contact me. I've already talked to Rob McCann also because he's having the same issues, and we'll see what we can do to get those limited commissions working for you also. But understand, my county legal is doing this at, they're cringing as we do it. We're not sure we're actually covered. And in reference to the Blake decision and the fix, there's no way this fix works because there's no system that we have that gives us the ability to track who's been given a warning across the state of Washington. Sector is not going to be that answer. It's already been mentioned as possible an answer. It's not the answer, and I don't know how this will work. 30, 60, 90-day treatment systems do not work, period. It is definitive. They do not work. If I had my wish list, if I had my magic wand, the next facility built in the state of Washington would be a long-term treatment facility where you are under court order because of your drug habits and or your criminal behavior, ordered to that facility to be, one, cleaned up, two, to have your mental health issues dealt with, three, once you get that done, you need to start working on the golden three. The golden three are simply this: they need education, job training, they need a job, and they need a house so we can break the cycle of incarceration. That is the key to breaking the cycle of incarceration. You will never get there if you do not deal with the underlying issues that put them on the street, and that is their mental health issues and their drug addiction issues. Allowing people to shoot up, giving them free spaces to shoot up, is nothing more than assisted homicide, in my opinion. So you want to end this problem? There are ways to end it, but you're going to have to invest the capital to do so. Speaking with Rob McCann, 85% of the people he's dealing with out on the street, the chronic homeless, and let's call it truly what they are chronic homeless. 85% of them have mental health issues. The reason they're on the street is because the state went with least restrictive alternatives as a way to deal with their mental health issues in the state of Washington, which means they basically emptied the institutions. Some people do not do well outside the institution. They put them in a group home. They fail at the group home. They don't go back to the institution. They go out on the street. This is not the way to deal with our mental health issues. You've heard me talk about this for 15 years now. You want to end this problem. You want to end the problem that you're seeing out on your streets. You have to deal with those underlying issues, and you have to have a facility that is long enough to detoxify their brain, to get them back in order. And 24 months is just about the minimum that it takes to do that. And I'll get off my soapbox, and if there's any questions. To answer Don's question, I do not consider that I had any input into these reforms. I was not contacted. I was not spoken to. And Senator Billig has mentioned that I did have a conversation with him. Well, here's how that conversation took place. Senator Schessler called me last minute when 1054 was about ready to be passed, said they added the armored vehicles back into the restricted military equipment. You need to do something. Call Andy, maybe he can help. I had Todd Milkey call Andy and say, look, you do this, it's going to cost us $850,000. That was my input, folks. Does that sound like input? I don't consider that input. That's what you call a Hail Mary trying to save a piece of equipment.
Okay, Sheriff, I appreciate it. And I know there's some questions out there and we could probably stay here all day. What I would ask and hope, I see Lisa, Sulani, and Dawn, your hands are up. If you can forward me your questions, I would love to keep a conversation going. And if we could do it via email, there will be a follow-up. I would like to continue in October. But Sheriff, thank you for your service. Thanks for being here on the whim. I know this was last minute notice, but thank you. And thank you those who attended us. We shortchanged Shelley O'Quinn, the CEO of Innovia. She has got a wonderful initiative called Say Yes to Education. We're going to bring her back in October. So just so you know, she had to check out here at 10 o'clock. And I know a lot of you have to and move on. I want to thank you on that. I want to leave you with this. Tomorrow's a big day. I get emotional on 9/11. But this is a Harry Truman quote. America was not built on fear. America was built on courage, on imagination and unbeatable determination to do the job at hand. So here it is as we go into tomorrow, reflect on that and who we are. I appreciate it. Senator Billig, I see you on. Thanks for joining us. Sheriff, thank you. And thanks to all those that attended today. This will be put into a link and it will be uploaded. And if you want a copy, we'll send it out. So thank you. Oh, Sheriff, can we use that? Would you share the PowerPoint? Is that shareable?
Oh yeah, who do you want me to send it to?
If you send it to me, that'd be great.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
If you do me, do I have your?
I'll make sure you have it. I'll send it to you. All right. Thank you all. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
Have a good day.